What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic. And when it comes to the Stardust Racers tragic incident where a guest died while on the attraction, I have had multiple videos talking about this, just trying to provide all the information that is out there. And to my surprise, besides the mainstream media, there haven't been that many channels really talking about this incident. And of course, we're still learning about the details of this, and the investigation is yet to be completed. But I did see a video pop up from a channel that I do enjoy, which is Great American Coasters. As we have reacted to content from him before, I always think he has really good insight and input into things. So we're going to watch through this, react to it, and see, if where I'm at with this is also where he is at with this, because I really am curious where other people are in terms of, their perspective on this incident, this tragic incident that has happened at Epic Universe involving Stardust Racers. So we're going to watch through this, get some thoughts on it, and see where everything stands.
Oh, thank God. Stardust Racers has officially reopened. It's over, guys. The nightmare has concluded. We can finally ride this coaster once again, or for the first time if you've never ridden it before. Personally, I did not expect this ride to reopen so soon. Actually, I thought we were going to be living in an alternate timeline where the coaster was closed for 1 to 2 years as we waited for a civil lawsuit to conclude.
That is one thing I am surprised by, is how quickly they have reopened this, and that was just some uncertainty. Of course, we speculated on here talking about that was, how long would this be shut down for? I really figured we might see this ride be shut down well into November or longer, because the investigation still has not officially been completed. But yeah, it reopened last week and seemingly just full bore ahead. And that was one of the surprising things about this, was just how quickly, and the fact that also Universal didn't change anything about the ride. They just changed the ride warnings on here. So that much I agree with, because there was a lot of uncertainty around that.
Heavens, I was so monumentally incorrect, because I much prefer this outcome. It's truly astonishing how quick of a turnaround time we had, because I uploaded my video on the topic only 3 days ago. Initially, I wanted to be patient. I wanted to make sure I had all the facts and all the details about the accident so I wouldn't have to make a premature discussion. Yet after 2 weeks of sitting and waiting, I basically still had nothing to work with. But who knew I just had to wait until Friday for Universal to finally come forward with another press release. And here in this press release, they stated the following. As previously indicated, our comprehensive technical and operational review confirmed the ride systems functions properly throughout the boarding process, the duration of the ride, and upon the ride vehicle's return to the station. And our team members followed procedures throughout. Our extensive review was conducted working closely with local officials, and the state of Florida observed the testing and reviewed the results. In addition, the ride system manufacturer of record and an independent third-party roller coaster engineering expert conducted their own on-site testing and validated our findings. Safety, as always, is our top priority. To further assist guests in determining whether they can or cannot ride an attraction, we are updating operational procedures and attraction signage to reinforce existing ride warnings and physical eligibility requirements at Stardust Racers and other attractions. This means we are prepared to reopen Stardust Racers on Saturday afternoon, October 4th. So yesterday at the time of this video's release. There you go, that was Universal's response, and I have to say, I am still in full support of Universal. Personally, I don't think they did anything wrong. Universal is not a malice company. They would never cut corners or jeopardize safety. They have not displayed any of this behavior before.
That is a great point, and that is something that obviously people have opinions on this, about what happened, and you have Ben Crump making accusations at Universal, essentially saying that Universal is running an unsafe attraction and an unsafe theme park, blaming team members for not responding quick enough and all these things. But I think where it becomes important is to look at the track record. There is no track record of Universal cutting corners on safety, nor at, say, Disney World. Now, you get into other theme park destinations, that can change, but especially when you're talking about the two biggest theme park destinations in the world, there has been nothing I have seen that would indicate to me that they cut corners. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They have a lot of incentive to run safe theme parks. There's a lot of money on the line. Universal is putting a ton of money into their theme parks. If they were to start cutting corners on safety, that would essentially nullify anything that they're going to do into the future. And the new park they just opened, Epic Universe, where this ride is at, $6 to $8 billion investment, would basically become worthless if they did not have proper safety and maintenance of their attractions. So a lot of the things that have been thrown around about Universal how people feel about it. But when you look at the track record of this, and I think he goes into further talking about this, it becomes rather evident there is no, oh my gosh, look at all this over the years of them not paying attention to these things. But I think that's something to keep in mind here that is important, and why if this ended up going to a trial, that would become part of the argument from Universal, is pointing to like, where have we cut corners? Why would we do that? There's no incentive for Universal to do this. And I think that's a really good point he brought up.
Or currently. It just grinds my gears when I hear the fucking mainstream media go on their little tirades trying to smear and badmouth Universal in every possible way. Saying that, oh, this ride is unsafe, and what? There are previous incidents before this accident, like somebody getting a headache? Well, this is unacceptable. Universal should have known this ride was a danger.
I completely agree with that. And one reason I was covering this as much as I was, or continuing to cover this, is what the rhetoric was coming out of the media, was essentially framing this and fear-mongering, which the media does. Now, I am no fan of the mainstream media and typically their narratives they put out there. So it's not surprising because that's how the media operates. But knowing how, theme parks operate and looking at incidents that do happen on roller coasters especially, but theme park attractions in general, the millions of people that come through Universal Studios and say Walt Disney World, the little amount of people that are injured or report something happening like a headache on a roller coaster is minuscule. It is literally a blip on the radar. And they were taking a tiny few incidents and acting as if this was some sort of paper trail of, oh my gosh, look at these incidents here. And of course this was going to happen. And again, not surprising. They're just going off of a narrative that has been set by someone trying to obviously manipulate through fear-mongering and emotional appeal and all these things like that. It is very infuriating to see happen.
Believe this company would let the public on a ride they knew was unsafe. This kind of journalism, it annoys me. It pisses me off. It's all fear-mongering to get a catchy headline. And don't think that the family's lawyer, Ben Crump, is any different. In my opinion, he is just as guilty to contributing to this practice. For the last 2 weeks, he's been on a non-stop publicity tour, bad-mouthing Stardust Racers, bad-mouthing Universal, and saying that this whole accident is completely Universal's fault, and they should have known that this ride was dangerous. And sure, yes, he can make all of those claims, but he better have the receipts to back them up. And so far, I haven't been convinced. Hell, most of what this lawyer spews, I have to give heavy pushback to. Like a statement that there were multiple incidents on Stardust Racers, and now many victims are starting to come forward.
Stardust Racers roller coaster riders who have come forward to the family and our office leads us to believe that Kevin's case was not an isolated incident. Even before the ride opened, on April 30th, 2025, a woman complained in a recently filed lawsuit that while riding the Stardust Racers roller coaster, her head shook violently and slammed again into her seat's headrest throughout the duration of the ride. This is before the ride even opened. They had a complaint of a lady talking about she had restraint issues.
Yeah. So when it comes to Ben Crump, I didn't know much about him before any of this. Now, when he started making his comments, a lot of people in my comments on videos had a lot of opinions about him. And I was like, oh, I was unaware of really who he was. But the more his behavior and what he's done the past few weeks is had a press conference every Monday, essentially just going on about how unsafe Universal is and really slandering their name about just hearsay, things that have been said on social media. Or one of the main points they brought up is somebody who made a comment on the GoFundMe that they were injured on this ride. And really the only thing I can find are 2 incidents that were actually reported, because Universal and say Disney World have to report injuries on the rides that they have if it's reported to them. Obviously, it's not reported to them. There's no way to know. But there's been 2. Both instances were people who had pre-existing conditions. That's basically been it. This park has been open for nearly 6 months, and you've had 2 incidents of people actually reporting this, and a woman, which I think he's going to talk about, that filed a lawsuit after this incident happened of saying she was injured back in April during previews. And the thing is, I have deep, deep sympathy and condolences to the victim's family. They're going through an unimaginable tragedy in their lives. But Ben Crump is turning this into a circus. He's threatening a lawsuit, threatening to do all these things. He was going on and on about how they were blindsided by Universal reopening Stardust Racers. And when a reporter asked them point blank, why didn't you file an injunction? You had over 24 hours from the time Universal said they were going to reopen this ride to when they finally did. And he said, oh, it's because we took their word that they weren't going to do this. You could have filed an emergency injunction. He's also then said, well, if they don't close it back down, we're going to sue. It's been almost a week now, and there's been no lawsuit. So at this point, I don't even know if they're going to bring a lawsuit. I don't even know if a lawsuit would even get brought to a trial at this point. But we're probably waiting on the fact that the investigation is not done yet, and they probably will file a lawsuit. But at this point, it's just a bunch of accusations denying common things. Obviously, Kevin Rodriguez Zavala's spinal cord injury that he had when he rode this attraction, that has been brought up. And anytime you bring that up, he basically says that that's victim blaming, and you can't bring that into the equation. Yet he's the only person that has had any sort of incident like this on this ride, and he just so happened to have this spinal cord injury. That's obviously something that you can bring up, and you should bring up, and it's just turning into a spectacle. And I think there's a lot of goodwill, of course, that the family had, but I think by hiring Ben Crump and his behavior, I do think has led a lot of people in terms of the support maybe the family had in this situation. I do feel like that has been waning. So I don't think Ben Crump's helping his cause at all here. And I'm wondering if he also was assuming he could bully Universal into essentially just caving to them due to public pressure. And thus far, it has not worked, as Universal is going to have very good lawyers of their own. And essentially now he may be stuck in the situation where he's going to try and ramp up the rhetoric to just try and make enough noise for Universal to pay him to go away. I kind of feel like that's the strategy, but I completely agree. Crump and the accusations he's making are essentially at this point baseless. He doesn't have roller coaster experts coming in here and saying that they know anything about this or this is unsafe. He's just simply up there talking about how unsafe it is, and half the time he can't even get the name of the ride correct. So I don't know how serious you can take him when he doesn't even know the name of the roller coaster in which the client that he is representing died on. I'm not saying that doesn't mean the accusations are not real or true, but it's not a great look either.
So this woman who claimed that she rode the ride back in April, she didn't file her lawsuit until September 24th, almost a week after the Kevin Zavala accident. And then the whole lawsuit was settled on September 26th, 2 days later, with a notice of settlement and a voluntary dismissal with prejudice, meaning that the case is permanently closed and she can't file the case again. So let me get this straight. She claimed she was violently shaken on Stardust Racers back in April before the ride opened, but she didn't file her lawsuit until months later after a bigger incident occurs, and then she settles the whole thing within 2 days. Call me crazy, but something doesn't quite add up here. Now, some people might call this lawsuit, frivolous, claiming that maybe the woman is trying to get some quick money by jumping on top of a situation that has a lot more public discourse, so this might be the perfect jumping off point to sue Universal, and potentially get a check. Some people might allegedly say that. Now, other cases that the lawyers were—
I don't know who would say that. That would be a terrible thing to allege that would happen. Just absolutely just reprehensible, if I'm being quite honest. I mean, make the reprehensible behavior, but that's not anything that I nor anybody else I think would obviously claim in this situation.
Cases that the lawyer is referring to about people having similar incidents on Stardust Racers, I can't find anything to substantiate what he's saying, unless he's referring to cases where people got a headache or got dizzy from the roller coaster, which if this is all he's referring to, then I'm sorry, I can't be on Mr. Crump's side. I'm still gonna back Universal. Spoiler alert, almost everybody at one point has gotten a headache from a roller coaster. I mean, when I go to Universal, I certainly get a headache from time to time, and usually I get headaches even more so on other roller coasters that aren't at Universal. But do I sue parks like Six Flags Great America because I kept smacking my head into the restraint on Demon? No, I've ridden Demon before, I knew the risk, and even if I didn't, there's a warning sign in front of the entrance to alert me. Warning signs exist for a reason. They're trying to warn you. If you are prone to headaches, dizziness, have epilepsy or back problems or spinal issues, you should not be riding.
Here's a great look, and I agree with everything he's saying. Now, we don't know the details yet of what happened on this incident where Kevin Zavala died while on the ride. Now, we do know he had a spinal cord injury, that he was a paraplegic, he was in a wheelchair. There's also, I talked about, there's a fire medic channel that he's an EMT for the theme parks, and talked about how many times people that are paraplegic, they tend to fall forward very easily. Obviously, Universal updated some of the warnings, and I think that's going to give us an indication of what they're going to end up coming away with the final report on the investigation, and that if you have weakened bones or weakened muscles, you are not also to ride this attraction, on top of being able to actually walk from your wheelchair or ECV onto the ride that you're riding on certain attractions. But we're speculating here, and what the lawyer has said, Ben Crump, is that this bar right here, where my mouse is, that is where the blunt force trauma took place. Now, we're assuming this was his head that hit this, but we haven't got any actual word on that. But you can see right here, look how far down that is where this gentleman is sitting. That is a long ways down, which would mean, obviously, the ride warnings are there about back conditions and neck conditions, which having a spinal cord injury like that would fit into that category. So again, I agree with what he's saying. The ride warnings are there for your safety, that not all rides are for all people. And the fact that if he was able to hit that, I mean, that almost means that there was literally nothing in terms of the strength to hold yourself back, because I don't even know, mind you, I know I'm 6'3", I'm longer and taller, but I don't even know if I could physically get my head down there if I tried. And that's the thing I think is perplexing, if that's what happened here, which I think this also goes into the extreme nature of this, given this is the only incident like this has happened. And if this is the injury that took place, I on the physics of it, I don't even quite understand how this would have happened. And obviously we'll find out eventually once they reveal the investigation. But if what the lawyer is speculating, if he was on the front row, that is quite a ways down. Now, if he was on the back row, which, again, we don't know where he was sitting on this. Now, I suppose the one that's more feasible potentially, if he was on the back row and maybe hit his head against, if we're assuming it was his head, which I don't know where other the blunt force would come from, I suppose you could hit your head on this. But if I'm looking at just from this woman is sitting, I mean, I don't think that she would be able to reach and hit her head there. Like, I would just assume that these rides are designed to where if someone did fall forward in the second seat, that they would not be able to hit their head there. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of questions about this. We don't have all the answers yet. This is me speculating at this point, but this has been a point of confusion I have had the entire time in terms of the physics of, like, how did this even happen? Because obviously this has not happened before on this ride, and since it's reopened, this hasn't happened. That has been something I'm utterly confused by, is really the physics of how this even occurred.
Most roller coasters. Parks like Universal are not responsible for knowing your medical problems. That's your issue. If you have some kind of medical disability that might be impacted by a roller coaster, then you or your family have to make the appropriate judgment call whether or not to go on the ride. Sure, Universal, they can warn you, they can tell you not to go on the attraction, but ultimately, it's your decision, unless it's blatantly obvious that you cannot ride. Now keep in mind.
Agreed. And I'll just say, personal responsibility. I mean, it is your responsibility to understand your medical conditions and if you're fit for a ride. I mean, if you look at what Universal is able to do, they can't ask you anything about your medical condition. If you're in a wheelchair, they can't ask you what your disability is. You know, it is on you to understand these things, and it's in your inherent risk to ride something given whatever medical condition that you have or may not have.
What I'm saying is not discrimination. I'm not trying to discriminate against anyone who has a disability, despite what Ben Crump says. It's a safety risk. Universal can and should turn people away if they believe that their condition can jeopardize their life. And what we can see from Universal following this accident, they do appear to be taking some extra safety precautions. Now, if you want to ride Stardust Racers, you have to meet an additional criteria. Anyone now who is currently using a mobility device, they must be able to walk independently from that device. So if you are completely wheelchair bound and cannot walk independently, you will be turned away from Stardust Racers. And not just Stardust Racers, because Universal is implementing this on many of their other attractions. Monsters Unchained, Hagrid's, Velocicoaster, Dragon Racer Rally, essentially anything that features a lap bar with a few exceptions. Is this disappointing to hear? Yeah, a little bit. I do feel for those guests who will no longer be able to ride these attractions, but I can't really fault Universal for doing this. It's kind of like Dueling Dragons when somebody got hit in the face with a cell phone, and after that, almost every single ride at Universal implemented a locker system to ensure that no loose articles could be carried on the ride anymore. Luckily, no drastic, long-lasting changes were implemented onto Stardust.
I mean, this is also what typically happens in really anything in life. Once there is something that happens like this, then there are new restrictions that come about to prevent that. There was recently a roller coaster, I don't remember which one, at another theme park where a cell phone did fly out and hit somebody in the head on that ride, and they have implemented a metal detector and a similar type system that Universal has. So a lot of times there is a reaction to something that happens that tries to prevent that same scenario from happening again. And again, I agree. I feel bad for the people that otherwise would have been perfectly fine to ride this attraction. I do sympathize with them, but I also can't fault Universal for taking that extra step and just ensuring that this incident, like what happened here, does not happen again.
In my initial video, I was jumping to worst case scenarios, like what if they had to trim and slow down Stardust? What if they had to install new comfort collars as a way to keep the riders upright? But no, none of that happened. According to the park, Mock Rides, third-party engineers, local and state investigators, they all came to the conclusion that the ride was functioning properly, it does not need to be updated, and it can continue to operate moving forward. All of these parties agree that Stardust Racers is safe enough to continue operation, all except the party of Ben Crump, who allegedly went on record to say that this reopening was a grave risk to public safety. If you couldn't tell, I am not a fan of Ben Crump, or his opinions, but it's for a very good reason. You want to know why I refer to this guy as a Johnny Cochran type lawyer? It's because he doesn't make any sense.
Pre-existing injuries. So it's almost as if they're washing their hands. But we believe that these were warning signs, that there was something wrong with the design of this ride, and that they tried to blame the victims.
Does that make sense? Ladies and gentlemen, I am not making any sense. None of this makes sense.
He doesn't pull in experts to support his theories or substantiate his claims.
Exactly. It's just him. It doesn't have anybody. That would be one thing if he brought in some world-renowned roller coaster expert to sit up there with him and say that and say, yes, this is the case. I imagine he reached out to some. They probably all had the same thing and said, no, like, I'm not going to put my reputation on the line, even if you're willing to pay me money to do this, because obviously in this situation, he's basically saying that Universal and Mack, or Mock Rides, I like to say Mack, but Mock Rides here, are inherently have designed a deadly roller coaster, and they knew it. Now, this roller coaster is brand new, meets code, has been inspected, is daily. Every time this runs, it runs and tests every single day. That is quite the accusation to make, that you essentially have designed a death trap of a ride, and they're trying to cover it up. You would have to bring a lot of receipts to show that that is the case. You'd have to show that internally Universal knew this, and there were emails between Mock Rides and Universal, and they're trying to cover this up. That's essentially what he's saying here. And again, like I pointed out before, why would Universal take that risk? Let's say they built this coaster, and then they find out after the testing, oh man, this thing could be really deadly. Do you think that they would risk $6 to $8 billion that they spent on building Epic Universe on doing this for an attraction that wasn't cheap, but let's just say it cost a couple $100 million to build. Maybe not even that much. I don't know how much it cost to build this. They would have eaten that cost and put in a new attraction here because it's too much of a liability. Not only would it put in question Epic Universe, the Universal brand as a whole, but it wouldn't be worth the cover-up. So the idea here that this massive conspiracy that he's saying is happening here is ludicrous from the beginning, just from a logical standpoint of brand rep awareness and history of Universal, and what would they gain from this? Because if they knew this was the case, they knew this scenario would likely play out again. And then them reopening it without any changes, they would be taking on even more risk after this. Like, it's silly to basically take his word that this is what happened here without any evidence, and you'd have to find a lot of evidence for this. And I've always felt the whole time that rhetoric is just kind of nuts.
No, he's just telling us a story and playing off our emotions. For example, whenever anyone mentions that Mr. Savala had spinal cord atrophy and how it may be linked to the cause of death, he immediately starts spouting out that this is offensive and insulting to Mr. Savala, and if Universal believes that disabled people shouldn't go on a roller coaster, then why would they help him? It seems like he disregards critical talking points, like Mr. Savala's condition, so he can more effectively uphold his narrative of what happened. Perhaps if I heard a testimony from the medical examiner or the person who performed the autopsy, and they were able to confirm what Mr. Crump is saying, then I would consider buying into his truth. But that hasn't happened yet. The only thing I have heard from Mr. Crump is the same talking point of Mr. Zavala having blunt force trauma. Okay. Where was the blunt force trauma? What definitively caused the blunt force trauma? And why was it reported that during the night of the accident, a defibrillator was deployed? So was this blunt force trauma located at his head or in his chest? Because a defibrillator is supposed to restart your heart's natural rhythm, not jumpstart your heart if it stops. So if he had blunt force trauma, you sure it wasn't due to him getting striked in the chest? It's very possible he could have suffered from commotio cordis, where a sudden blow to the chest, usually directly over the heart, can cause disruption in electrical signals. Or could it have been a cardiac contusion, where a widespread chest impact can lead to irregular rhythms? I'm just saying that if either of these situations ended up being the case, then I think Mr. Crumb's whole theory of Mr. Zala hitting the bar in front of him would completely fall apart.
I mean, I get what he's getting at. I think with what we know now, I mean, there have been multiple reports talking about there was blood on his head. I don't know where a blunt force impact on his chest would come from. Because as far, like we looked in the other shot there, as far as your head would have to travel to hit either the bar or the seat in front of you, that's even more implausible that your chest would hit that as well. So I think undoubtedly, at this point, at least in my opinion, I mean, obviously we'll find out sometime soon, that he hit his head. Because I just don't know physically how your chest would hit something before your head did. Now, I suppose it could be both, but even that scenario, I think at this point it's more than likely a head injury. I mean, when you're talking about blunt force trauma, it's either, chest or head that would cause a death. I just don't see how it would be the chest.
I was always skeptical about this theory. I do not think your head can actually reach the bar if you're sitting down. I think the more plausible scenario is that he struck his chest on the restraint. Of course, that's just what I think. We won't actually know the details until an autopsy report is released. I get that Mr. Crump, he's just doing his job. He's a lawyer, a civil rights lawyer. But that doesn't mean I can't criticize him and tell him that some of the things he's saying is BS. But man, this guy will not give the media interviews a rest. He is using every trick in the book to try and get the public on his side. I don't remember him going on a massive 2-week-long media campaign during the Icon Park accident. In fact, I didn't even know he was representing the family from the Icon Park accident. There was very little media coverage on whether or not Icon Park was in the right or wrong, because it was pretty cut and dry. The kid fell off from the ride. It was horrific. So it didn't take much elbow grease to win the public's favor. Stardust Racers, on the other hand, this whole situation has been a lot more gray. There could have been an argument to say that Universal, they were partially responsible for this accident. But as we now get more and more hindsight about the situation, this appears to be less and less true. Given that Universal has already come forward with their statement that the ride functioned as intended and multiple sources are backing them, and now that the ride has reopened, it looks like Crump's lawsuit is starting to unravel. As of now, it looks like Universal...
Well, mind you, he hasn't even filed a lawsuit. Like I said before, there's still yet to be one filed.
They're not too concerned. After all, the only thing they implemented after the accident was some additional signage and an update to their policies. Plus the whole argument that Mr. Crump is making that Universal employees help Mr. Savala onto the roller coaster doesn't appear to hold much water. To my understanding...
Oh, that one from the beginning, I said made no sense. And again, I've had multiple team members reach out to me and say, like, there's no way that they believe a team member helped. And then the latest press conference, because he's given 3 now, and he's probably going to continue to do these every Monday, going in here and just slandering and making a bunch of accusations at Universal. But they said in the latest one that a team member provided a transfer device, which is something they can do, but they can't physically themselves, like, hold your hand or help you onto an attraction. And I think in another statement, I couldn't find it, but I remember seeing where they said that they helped him potentially like strap into the ride. Once you're sitting into the ride, they can obviously help you, put on a seatbelt or pull a lap bar down. That is something they can do. Because I think I saw something where it said they had to try 3 or 4 times to do it because he was a bigger guy, which also goes into if he's a bigger guy, having enough force to really come forward and like hit your chest sort of situation. That gives me a lot of questions. But that whole rhetoric, what they had claimed from the beginning, I always felt was just that did not happen. So I completely agree there.
Every Universal employee knows that this is a big no-no. You are never allowed to help someone with a disability onto a ride. Employees are fully aware that this is a liability, and almost no one would want to risk their job for this. I think Mr. Crump is trying to use a hyperbolized version as what he constitutes as helping. Like, who's to say opening the gate for someone to hop on the ride doesn't count as helping? Or hitting the button to an elevator doesn't count as helping? I don't know what actually happened. Again, if the contrary turns out to be true, I will change my tune. If not, I'm not going to take this lawyer's word for it. Truthfully, I think the most logical outcome for this lawsuit is a settlement. This will not go to trial. Most lawsuits never do, only about 5% of them. My prediction is that Mr. Crump, he's going to do a few more TV interviews, he's going to badmouth Universal a little more, and then eventually Universal, they're going to be fed up with it, they're going to pay him off, shut him up, and then everyone can move on with their lives. No matter how this saga concludes.
Although at this point, I agree with him, by the way. I think this whole thing has been, they're trying to get a settlement. I don't think that this would hold up in court. But I do wonder at some point, given where at least I feel the public sentiment is on this, which I feel like most people, I can look through the comments on the videos I've done on this. I think 99% of people all have the very same viewpoint, which is a lot of sympathy for what happened. They feel terrible for the family, but that he rode the ride with an existing health condition in which he shouldn't have, and this is what led to this issue. If that's where the public sentiment is, and if Crump has made Universal mad enough by the accusations that they've been throwing out there, I do wonder if the whole idea here is for a settlement, if they just simply ignore it. And does Crump continue to just have weekly press conferences? Because at some point, if they never file a lawsuit and he's just out here every single week, making more claims, I mean, I think at some point, even the media would just start ignoring it. Like, people would just be like, oh, it's Crump again with another press conference about what happened here. I wonder if they do that. Now, they could pay out. I think, if anything, it's very likely that they will pay out some sort of settlement. But I don't think it's going to be near what they got for the Icon Park one, because I think they paid out $320-some-odd million from that one. But again, like he said, a lot of the safety protocols were not followed. That is not seemingly the case here with Stardust Racers. So if they're looking for a $300 million payout, Universal may sit there and look at that and be like, we're not paying you that much. And so I am curious as to how long, if there's no lawsuit filed, how long does this continue in terms of him just going out here and spouting things, and what is Universal's response to it? That part will be interesting.
Saga concludes. I just want to say that, again, this was a tragedy, a terrible situation that should have never happened. I feel for the family, I really do. I don't even blame them for suing Universal, because if I was in the same situation, I would probably do the same. I'm just trying to take an objective and unbiased standpoint. At the end of the day, Mr. Zavala, he should have never ridden the ride with his condition.
I completely agree with that final part as well. Complete sympathy and for the family, and I agree with him. I don't blame them for suing, wanting answers. I can't imagine being in that position, and like I said, it's even more tragic. It's tragic that anything like this happens, but I can't even imagine going to a theme park and leaving with one less person, and something happening like that. So I myself have not really put any scorn or any of my comments toward the family, because they're going through a terrible, terrible ordeal. But I think Crump's behavior is obviously in question, and the accusations that he has here. And, everything that he said in this video, I agree with. I have a lot of questions about the physics of what happened. And maybe he is right about, it could have been a chest injury. We don't know. Either way, if it was the head or the chest, I don't understand the physics of it. That's something I'm very curious about the investigation, because I think we all can look at this for the most part and agree with what he said of, it's a tragedy, but Kevin Zavala should not have ridden this ride in his condition. But the fact that it reopened as quickly as it did with some updated safety warnings, it kind of tells you right then and there of what, the fact that Universal would not be taking this type of risk and reopening this if there was even a chance that there was something that was the fault of the ride necessarily. So like I said, it's a really good video. I always enjoy Great American Coasters. Go subscribe over there to that channel and enjoy the inputs there. And, it's kind of interesting just getting another perspective on this, because sometimes when you're talking on YouTube, I'm just in a spare bedroom in my house talking in front of a camera. You have the comments on videos, and most of the comments have been rather agreeing with my perspective. Obviously not everybody, but I've just been kind of curious where other people are at. So at least when it comes to Great American Coasters, I think we're on the same wavelength here in terms of the opinions or ideas of what happened here. But I'm sure we will see very soon. I would assume the investigation will wrap up on this, and what happens after that will probably be pretty interesting after that as well. But either way, that is going to be it though for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel as we do all this coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.